Hey, what's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today I will be reviewing The Shining in preparation to see Dr. Sleep when that's released to digital next week. The Shining is directed by the legendary Stanley Kubrick, and it stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and Danny Lloyd. This is the second time I watched and scored The Shining. It took me a long time to originally see it, both because I grew up in a household where we avoided horror films at all costs, and two, because, to be completely honest, it never really piqued my interest until later in life when horror became more of a guilty pleasure genre. The real question was, did I waste my life away by waiting, or was I right to be lily-livered? Let's get cracking. This review is brought to you by the word of the day, lily-livered, lacking courage, aka cowardly. The Shining centers on Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, who was just hired as the Overlook Hotel caretaker during the winter months, when the hotel is closed. He plans to use the peace and quiet to write his next book, but when strange things start occurring in the hotel, he begins to lose his sanity. At the hotel with him is his wife and son, Danny. Danny has the Shining, acutely aware of the dangers that lie within the hotel and the disturbances his father is experiencing. I definitely have a strange relationship with this film because I'm on both sides of that spectrum. There's definitely some amazing and arguably iconic things to find in The Shining, but there's also a glaring problem too. Stephen King famously hates this adaptation from his book. It might even be the film he hates the most, which has a lot of people scratching their heads because it's probably his most beloved film adaptation out of the entire bunch. And there's a ton. Obviously, the film takes its own creative liberties, but Kubrick mostly upped the ante on most things that weren't in the book, like using an axe at the end instead of a croquet mallet, or using that big, expansive maze outside instead of living hedges, or the twist with the book that he's writing, or the freakish twins that Danny keeps seeing. It's all from Kubrick's mind, not King's, so even though I understand the author being kind of frustrated, you gotta admit that those are better changes. The main complaint I have with it, though, is the mistreatment of Danny's character, who was 1,000 times more prominent in the book, and, if you've seen it, the Shining miniseries, which closely follows the book more so than the film does. Why does that matter? Because in the real story, Danny is the main character, and Jack is the villain. And that makes sense, because Danny's a likable kid, and Jack just never was a likable character. They painted him as a terrible person before he ever set foot in the hotel. He's an alcoholic. He abused his son. His wife is already sticking up for him, visibly on edge, thinking about him. He's not a likable guy. So why is he the main character of the movie? The only thing that I can think of is Jack Nicholson, which people will pay more to see than this random kid. But on the other side of that, this film is a horror film. Not so much in the sense of trying to scare the audience, though. I'd say it's a horror film in the sense that it's trying to dig deep into your psyche and potentially give you nightmares. That's because there's a lot of haunting imagery, music, and camera work in this film that sets it apart from everything else. Personally, I was never frightened by the film. I don't find it scary in the least bit, but I can at least appreciate what it was doing to disturb the audiences. Back when it came out, it was a messed up movie, and I can certainly see some things being a lot scarier back then than in 2020, so I can appreciate that, but I'm not sure a blind audience will ever have the same experience with The Shining ever again. It's just not feasible. But even without that debilitating fear that I'm sure everybody expects to find out of The Shining, they should still be able to take notice in the extremely iconic imagery and haunting atmosphere. That's one area of the film that may never, ever go away or age. The Overlook Hotel as a whole is one big case of perfect production design if ever I've seen one, because it's very much a character in the film, and because Danny isn't focused on as much as he should have been, the hotel is now the most interesting main character of the film. The cinematography, likewise, is beautifully masterful. You know it when you see a scene of The Shining, or you hear a scene in The Shining because of that deep synthetic organ music that is unmistakable. Trust me when I say that I have deep respect for The Shining and fully understand the things that make it a cinematic icon. If there's anything else I'd like to add, I would just say that there wasn't enough range from the actors. What they do is fine, and it's a believable transition for the characters, but it wasn't enough. For instance, Jack already starts out as an unlikable, slightly crazy guy. Even at the interview, he's using a lot of Nicholson-isms, which aren't normal for everyday folk. He eventually gets crazier throughout the movie. Shelley Duvall's character starts out at a point of defensiveness and ends up in a state of a lot more defensiveness. Danny starts out as a weird kid and ends up as a weirder kid. They all end up as a more exaggerated version of how they began, and I don't think that's the best thing in the world. It's fine for what it is, but I wanted to see more. Finally, I'm sorry, but that kid waving his finger around as Tony is stupid. I can't see that as a scary thing, and I'm not sure how audiences would either, not even back in 1980. So what did I score The Shining? 79%, 79 out of 100 Russell stars, granting it the letter grade of C+. So even though I highly respect a lot of the technical areas found in the film, I still consider it to be a flawed film, narratively speaking, as they should have been a little bolder and kept the kid as the main character, because as it is, the audience has nobody to connect with on an emotional level, and we're all just forced to see Jack Nicholson do his thing for 2.5 hours, which, if that's what you want to do, then fine, guys. Let me know what you think about The Shining. Does this iconic film still hold up well for a modern audience, or do you actually prefer the miniseries? Let me know down below. As for YouTube, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button if you like this review, would like to see some more. Like it, hit the thumbs up button because that always helps out my channel, and don't forget about that little bell icon which helps notify you when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out!